Hey everybody, Ragnar here, and welcome to my cave. Today I thought it would make sense to ramble about something that I've been invested with for quite some time. I'm working on something about Pathologic for quite a while. I hinted at that on Twitter not too long ago, that it's a difficult task for me to find the right angle to write a video essay on Pathologic. And I've been struggling with this for quite a while. There are at least 4 to 5 scripts that I started with that I put in the bin eventually because I wasn't satisfied with. So for those of you who don't know what Pathologic is, assuming that you have seen or watched my video on The Void, Monster of the Week, A Journey Through the Void. The Void is the other big game by the Russian game developer Icepick Lodge, and Pathologic is basically, in many eyes, their magnum opus. Pathologic is, at this point, quite old. It has gotten a HD remaster a couple of years back that fixed a lot of translation issues, and that is playable on modern computers, and you can get it on Steam and GOG.com. And not too long ago there was a Kickstarter for initially a complete reinterpretation of Pathologic, basically rebuilding the game on a completely new engine, which eventually turned into the project called Pathologic 2. If you want to give this project a shot, there is a free demo out there which tells a completely self-contained story. So it's not something that is cut out of the finished game, but it's really, I would almost say, a vertical cut through what these games are actually about. And I so far like the Marble's Nest demo a lot. But what I want to talk about is why I believe you should play Pathologic, aside from the fact that I will very likely release a video on it in the next months, depending on how quickly I get to writing a full-on video essay about it. And when you watch that video, there will be spoilers in it, so it will be cool for you to just be able to watch the video and not having to care about the spoiler warning. But aside from that, I think Pathologic is one of the most genius games ever made. It is about as genius as it is difficult to approach, and that is one of the big hurdles of this game. From today's point of view, the game certainly has a certain very distinct and strong atmosphere, but in many ways it looks everything but pretty. And aside from that, the game mechanics might seem extremely outlandish, but one of the reasons for that is Icepick Lodge's general approach when it comes to game making. The company was founded by a couple of friends, and none of them were programmers or artists or experienced game designers, but they came from academic fields like literature, psychology, and so on and so forth. And they decided that there is a story they want to tell that works perfectly in an interactive setting. So their approach was that they said, okay, we should, I guess, make a video game. I mean, of course, they were fans of video games before, but their general approach to what mechanics to use is far away from genre conventions. What they usually do is, okay, we want to tell this certain type of story. What kind of mechanic would suit best for it? And they oftentimes don't just go with the genre convention, but with what they feel is the best way to do it. So in Pathologic, you play one of 3 characters, and you enter an open world-ish town somewhere in the Russian steppe where a deadly plague breaks out. And each one of those characters you can select in the beginning has a completely different outlook on the plague and different ideas on how to approach this plague that haunts the town, and especially a different philosophical outlook on how to approach an incident like this. And in this way, one thing that you can immediately see is that the antagonist of the game, very atypically for most video games, is not somebody you can talk with, not somebody you can shoot or actively fight, but it's a very opaque adversary. It is in many ways a greater cosmic force, which is why I believe that not just because of this setting with the plague, but because of many of the themes and how they're executed, and a lot of the philosophy and the feeling of utter helplessness in a grander scheme that this game brings across, I think Pathologic is actually probably the best quote-unquote Lovecraftian game out there. one of the biggest problems with it is that it is quite hard to approach, because between interactions with different people in the city, like there are, for example, 3 ruling families that philosophically and ideologically strongly clash with each other, and you kind of end up between their game of power and mediate between them and try to solve situations while power play is at hand. You also have to survive. You have to eat, you have to drink. You can be infected with the plague, so you have to protect yourself from the plague. You get tired, you need to sleep, and in times of a deadly plague, resources are hard to come by, food is hard to come by, and so on and so forth. So you roam the city and you start scavenging, litter bins. You start collecting trash, start bartering with children and with drunk people, whatever. You really have to find a way to get through the days without, starving or without, dying from fatigue, which can pretty quickly happen. The first approach of this game is really, really difficult. At least that's how I felt. In order to get through the story, you have to actively learn how the systems work, and to be honest, I used guides for that. I talked with other people, like, how do you best survive in this city? So over time, you find a strategy on how to, acquire enough money to survive the night, how to acquire enough food to not suddenly starve, and that kind of. And that's an extra layer of strain that is put on top. And many times I found this very, very tedious. So it some of the times discouraged me from playing on, because it really is a tedium. So in that way, overcoming this is in some ways satisfying, because after a while you have figured it out. There is a way to easily survive. There is a way to easily have enough resources all the time, but you really need to learn that. Once you've learned that, you almost feel at home in the town. But then on top of that, there's the whole, the actual real story in there. That is where the genius lies, in my opinion, because the biggest task here is oftentimes, how do I approach this? When we play video games, usually, video games are structured around the player. Events wait until the player arrives. People do not do certain things unless you are there to witness it. Everything is tailored around you being the central part of the experience. While in Pathologic, you are just one character in this town. This entire event will be over in 12 full days, and the time passes continuously, and no matter if you are in the place of a certain event or not, the event will happen. No matter if you intervene or not, these events will happen. And the game strongly brings home the idea that you are not the protagonist of this incident, but that you are just one actor that takes part in what happens. And there are many, many different outcomes. Different people can die if you don't do the right things at the right time, and especially if you don't understand the people you talk with and listen to. People can lie to you. It's often said that they don't, but people white lie to you. People give you only the information that helps them, and sometimes if you say the wrong things to people, they won't let you end the quest of the day, which doesn't end the game, but which means that one of the important characters might die, and that will alter the outcome of the entire story. And aside from that, as I said, you approach this plague as 3 different characters. You start, for example, as the Bachelor, who is like a medical doctor and who is an outsider of town, which is strongly recommended to play the game as him first, because he is an outsider and he gets the most exposition. People treat him as an outsider, which is closest to your experience. And he approaches the plague from a very scientific perspective. The second character is the Haruspex, and the word Haruspex comes from ancient Rome, where certain clerical people were able to read the future from the intestines of dead people, and that's a second character that you are, and you have a completely different standing in town. You are a local of the town, you're a son of one of the doctors, and you have a completely different experience with uncovering this mystery, uncovering the power play between the families. And the third character is the Changeling, or the Devotress, which once again brings a completely different ideological approach when dealing with this plague. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but fact of the matter is that for the last weeks, and I've been regularly coming back to playing this game, and it is quite long. Like, until you get to a certain point where you can progress in the story, it is a really, really long experience because, 12 in-game days, and each character lives through 12 days. You can branch the narrative in many ways. You have side quests you can do, and the philosophy behind side quests, for example, is also something that I really like in this game because there is no experience points. When you get a side quest and you are not okay with what the side quests involve, with what the people want from you, it's totally okay not to do the side quest and say, no, that's not what I want to do. And the game doesn't punish you for it by giving you less experience points or something. It just alters the story and future events in a way that makes more sense for you. For sometimes, not doing a side quest leads to events in the future that might be way more beneficial to you or might be way more in line with your personal agenda than if you had done the side quest as somebody who is just, as a typical gamer who is just conditioned to just do all quests because they're quests. And over time you'll learn to approach this game with a very different mindset from video games as you're used to. And that is an experience that is extremely rare. The Void does this in some ways, but also in very different ways. But I've never experienced something quite like Pathologic, not even close, because the idea behind Pathologic is very close to a good tabletop role-playing session, where technically failure should not mean losing the game, but failure is part of the story you're telling. If you fail to accomplish certain tasks, the results are not necessarily or mostly not bad, but in a good campaign, it would lead to interesting results. And that's what Pathologic is about. You make mistakes, and in the end, you will fuck up. It's basically impossible to get everything right. Failure is part of the process, but that tells your story. And once you have that mindset set up, you experience it way different than the typical power fantasy you get from 99% of games out there that's just tailored around making you feel badass. You will feel helpless, and that's core of the experience. And also, it's extremely philosophically deep game. Like, the conversations you're having and the ideas you're encountering, they just make you think. They make you ponder. They linger, and that is very, very rare in video games. So I could go on for hours about this game, and in fact I kind of still plan to, but not in this video. My idea for this ramble was, this is very fresh in my mind, and I'm still very excited to talk about this game, and the people around me are already rolling their eyes and if I keep going on about Pathologic, so now you're my new guinea pig. And I do think if that sounds interesting to you, you should give the game a shot. As I said, go for Pathologic Classic HD, or if this really old interface doesn't appeal to you, try out the Pathologic Marble's Nest demo, which is also available on Steam. And because this gives a very good vertical slice on how the game works. But I'd recommend to really give this old, overlooked classic a shot. And yeah, as I said, it might make it more pleasant to watch my video essay later when you're not completely gonna be spoiled. If the game is too tedious for you, is too stressful and strenuous for you to figure out, then I recommend there is a YouTuber that I grew very fond of because he seems to be quite an expert on, He's very fond of Pathologic and spent a lot of time with it. He knows a lot about it. He also made a 2-hour-long video essay, and he made a let's play of each of the characters, and in this, he's approaching this as if he experiences it from the first time, but he shares also lots of knowledge, poses the right questions in the right moments. So if that's more something for you to see somebody else play it, I will put a link in the description of his Let's Play. So if you want to maybe not play it but watch it instead, that is my best recommendation. Like, this is a very good experience to go through this game with his guidance. So I think this is enough for today. I hope I could make you a little bit interested in Pathologic, and I hope I can get around to finishing my video on it within the next 2 months. Like, I'll see where we go, okay? So I hope you enjoy this little ramble. I hope you have a great day. Ta-ta!